as cost is very important, so please go back and try to explore more on the cost management, right? And billing dashboard, right? So various reports, right? Cost explorer, right? Budget. So all those things you just try to understand as a big picture, right? And how you can try to reduce the cost, right? So now we will discuss about the identity and access management, right? So what is IAM? So any idea about IAM? You have come across any IAM service, right, in your organization? Some kind of user management you might have come across, right?
Yes, Harish, we were using CA SiteMinder IDM.
Okay, okay.
And currently in AWS, we are using IAM in our
okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, good. So you are having AWS as well, right? So that's good. So here AWS is giving us option for identity and access management, right? So this is for controlling the access to AWS resources, right? So it's a web service that helps us to securely control access to AWS services, right? So in other words, it provides us controlled access to our resources that is there in AWS management console, right? So what we can do here, we can create some users, some group of users, certain roles, right? So we'll discuss about each and everything in detail, and I'll also show you some demos. You can also go ahead and do some hands-on, right? So here it gives us shared access to AWS account. Okay, so shared access to AWS account means we can grant somebody some permission to take care of a particular resource administration, right? Without sharing my own username or password, or without sharing my access key, right? I can allow, right, some particular resource, right, some particular person, right, to use and administer the resource. Got it? So this is a shared access to AWS account. It's not like one person is accessing and no other person is not able to access. I can grant access to somebody, right, without sharing my username and password. I can create some particular username for that person. So that person will be accountable for that particular username and password credential, right? So that is shared access to AWS account. Now you have granular permissions. So by granular permission means you can give different permission to different people, right? Different permissions. Say like one person can have one permission, right? Another person can have some other type of permission, right? One person can have access to some resource. Another person can have access to the same resource or another resource, right? At a different level of permission, right? So the permission would be granular. Permission would be granular. You understood this point? Granular permission, right? Prashant? Pradeep?
Yes, Harish.
Yes.
Right? So
Yeah.
this only means that, say like, for example, say like you can give complete EC2 access to say like system administrator, complete EC2 access. So that person can do anything with the EC2 instance. He can delete it, terminate it, create it, whatever, right? Say like to the same person or to some other person, what we can do, we can grant access to S3 bucket, right? Maybe we can give full access to S3 bucket to the administrator, or we can give only read-only access. Say like the person can go to S3 bucket and only see the content, cannot delete anything, right? So different type of permission can be granted to different entity, right? So like that we have options. So that is granular permission. Now it is integrated with AWS services. It's not something which is separate. It's like integrated with the AWS services. We have a number of services. So with most of the AWS services, right, this IAM security works, right? So this works with most of the services, almost like all of the services, you can say, to some extent, right? For something to a larger extent, for some service to a lesser extent, but everywhere some or the other option should be there, right, to deal with this security using the IAM service. Free to use, right? So this is like free. Say like somewhere you are going and creating instance, then you are paying for it. You are going and creating something else, you are volume, you are paying for it. You are creating snapshot, you are paying for it. So this one is like free to use. You are creating it. Say like you are creating that elastic IP and you are not using, then you are paying for it, right? If you're using, that is free only, right? So here by saying free to use, right, we are not charged for creating any particular user or a group or creating any credential, right? So we are not charged for that, right? But we'll be charged for accessing the resources, right? So when you are accessing the resources, so for that only you will be charged, not for creating or managing or configuring, right? IAM entities, right? We are not charged for that, right? So in that aspect, right, it's free to use. So usage is free from the IAM perspective, right? Now it gives controlled access per region option also, right? So what does it mean? Controlled access per region? We can do that configuration actually. So what we can do is we can assign security policy to a particular IAM user, right? Now what we can do there is we can control, right, access to any particular resource in any particular AWS region also, right? So we give some policy, we mention some policy where we give access to some user for a particular resource in a particular region, right? So we can give controlled access per region basis as well, right? So now there is a concept of multi-factor authentication, which you may be familiar, right? Multi-factor authentication, we are familiar. What is multi-factor authentication? Did we use with Gmail or something? Google? Anyone? Sridevi? Use multi-factor authentication?
Yes, two-factor communication we have done.
Pardon?
Gmail, Facebook also we are doing it. Right?
Yeah. Correct. So what we can do is using certain hardware or software devices, right? We are using say like some application or something in our mobile, right? So using certain system, right, hardware or software devices, we can implement some extra layer of security, right? So this multi-factor authentication will be providing us additional code, right? Some 6-digit code, something will come, right? Apart from whatever username password we are putting, apart from that, one extra layer will be added where we'll be getting some code, right? And we must put that code, then only that authentication will become success, right? Otherwise, it will not allow us to access. Correct? Agree?
Yes.
Right? So let's see, certain keywords are there, right, which may be specific to IAM, right? And you might have seen this earlier somewhere, but these things may be sometimes it will take certain practice or some time to be familiar and start using the same word, right? It may take certain some time, but simple words only, right? So resources you are already familiar, right? So here in IAM, resource means user, or say like a group or a role, right? Or a policy, right? So these are the resources here in IAM, right? What is resource in EC2? EC2 instance, right?
Yes.
So what is a resource in S3? S3 bucket, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So similarly, we have resource here. So simple, user or group or role or policy. So when I say, okay, resource, the IAM resource. So what you will understand, IAM resource means maybe user or group or role or policy. So whatever is stored in IAM, right, as a object, so that is called like resource, user or group or role or policy. Now another term is called identity, identities. So IAM resource objects that are used to identify and group, right? So what is that? IAM resource object that are used to identify and group something. That is called identity. Getting this? Can you relate? What can be there? What we can do here? Using the identity, we can identify, means we can actually attach, say like user, right? So what we can do? We can, user will be there. So in that user, we can attach a policy. Right? So the term identity we are using is, right, using which, right, some resource can be identified, right, and using this user or a group, or say like something will be called role, right, using user or group or role, right, what we can do, we can identify the resource objects, right? So we can
So like
identify.
account ID, email ID, like that.
It's like here in case of IAM, it will be like user. User is an identity,
Okay.
or group is an identity. What is your identity here? Means user, right? Or the identity of that resource object is group, right? So that resource can be identified using this identity. So this will be user or group or role here. Three things: user, group, and role. Right? You see here, first one is resource in we mentioned like user, group, role, and policy, right? So in identity, you understand like user, group, and role, and this policy can be attached to role, policy can be attached to group, policy can be attached to user, like that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So look at that, entities. Another term they will be using entity, this IAM entity, like that. So IAM resource objects used by AWS for authentication. Okay. So what we will be using for authentication, right? Users will be there actually, right? So IAM users will be there, and there is a concept of federated user also. So federation means what? It will be some on-premises user, right? My own existing user, right? So that will be federated user. So those federated user, which is not IAM user actually, which is user based on certain single sign-on. We may be using some LDAP, some single sign-on, some users. I may be having some existing user in my organization. So those kind of users, right, can also be called as entity. So IAM resource objects used by AWS for authentication, right? So here it can be IAM user, it can be federated user, or it can be IAM role, right? Which is already assumed by some identity, right? So IAM role assumed by some user or some kind of resource, some kind of service. So that will be called entity, right? Now there is something called principal. You saw somewhere this principal word. I think we're trying to create some policy or something, that there it was mentioned.
Life cycle policy.
Yeah, I think somewhere we saw this term principal, right? So this principal is a person or application that can make requests to AWS. So who can make request? I think we chose asterisk or something in place of that. So we didn't choose any particular user, right? So we allowed everyone maybe, right? So we gave like principle as we were doing that, writing that policy. So during that policy, we saw that term principle somewhere. Then we mentioned asterisk, mean anyone, any application or any person. So here principle means, right, application or a person, a particular application or a person who will be doing it on our behalf, whether it will be application, right? Or, yeah, I think during lifecycle policy you just pointed it right, Pradeep, right? So I think there only. Anyways, we'll see this one, right? I'll show you some no uses of it, right? So for now, what you understand is principal is an application or a person. Principal is person or application that can make request to AWS, right? So it can request AWS for certain operations on certain AWS resources, right? So I want to do this on that object. I want to read a bucket, right? I want to write to an object. So like that, some requests will be coming. Who will be making that request? Either a person or an application, right? So this particular principle, right, will be authenticated as AWS account, right, root user or IAM entity. You saw that entity, right? So
Yeah.
this is whenever this principle request for certain resource, it needs to be authenticated, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it may be root user, or it may be some IAM identity, that entity, right? So it can be IAM entity, or it can be root user, right? So they can be principal with respect to the person, or it can be some kind of application. So application will have some role. So through that, we call, in general, we call that it is a principle, right? So now policy, you have seen that policy, right? What is that policy? IAM policy, you heard, right? What is policy? Policy is, first thing is, policy is,
It's a resource.
it's a resource in IAM, right? What else?
Yeah.
Next, entity that when attached to an identity or resource. So here you will have a lot of terms. So you may not be able to relate as of now, right? So once you start doing hands-on, doing some testing, you will understand this one, right? So now you understand this policy is attached to a resource. Policy is attached to identity, right? So we just saw like identity. What is identity, right? So identity is a resource object that is used to identify. And now here we are saying it's an entity that when attached to an identity, so policy can be attached to an identity, right? So what is identity? Identity is user group or role, right? Identity is user group or role. So this policy is attached to user group or role, right? Or to resource. So when this policy is attached to user group or role or a resource, defines their permission. So what is the permission, right, on a particular resource by to some particular user or to some particular group, how much they can do on a particular resource, how much permission they are having, right? What permission they are having. So that can be controlled using this policy. Making clear? So this is, in short, this policy is determining the level of permission on a resource. Understood? Policy?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So let me explain this policy in detail. So this is something very important. So please give me a moment. Okay. So let's discuss this policy. Right. So Iam policy. Right. So it's related to authorization. There are two terms called authentication and authorization. Authentication and authorization. What is authentication? Any idea what is authentication? Authentication is to verify who the user is. Yeah. So this is like who the user is, right? And what is authorization? What access user has? What access or permission user has? Understood the difference? Right? Prashant, you're there with us?
Yes, correct.
So authentication means who the user is, and authorization means what access the user has. Correct?
Correct.
So here, say like what happens initially, we discuss, as we discussed now about principal we were discussing, right? So principal must be authenticated using certain credential, right? So whether it is a particular user or group or role or whatever, so it needs to be authenticated, right? As and when it tries to access a resource. So first thing is the authentication. First authentication will happen. It will just check whether what this user is claiming, whatever username, password, user is giving, right? Whether it is correct or not. So the user will be authenticated. Maybe user and password, and maybe multi-factor authentication, additional layer of security, right? So authentication will happen. Once authentication passes, then comes the authorization, right? So when it comes to authorization, this policy comes in picture. Okay. So what happens is authorization by default, all the access is denied. By default, all requests are denied. It will not be allowed by default. If anybody tries to access something, right? If default policy is allowed and we forget to deny, that person, anybody will be able to access any resource. So by default, all the access to all the resources are denied when it comes to authorization, right? So during the authorization process, AWS will be using certain values from the context of the request. So what is being requested? So certain values will be taken from that, and then whatever policies are attached to the resources, each and every policy will be thoroughly checked, right? And then it will be checking what is denied, what is allowed, right? So if explicitly some allow is written in the policy, then only it will be allowed. Explicitly, if something is allowed, spatially, specifically, right? Explicitly you have mentioned it that this should be allowed, then only it will be allowed. Otherwise, that authorization will not happen. User will not be authorized. User will be authenticated, but user will not be allowed to do anything, right? So that is authorization, right? So if you say, no, if you allow something and then explicitly if you deny, right, then what will get more preference? Allow or deny? Just think and tell.
Can you come again, Harish?
So my question is, you are explicitly allowing and explicitly denying also, right? Or you are simply, giving certain small access, and you are but you have you are not writing anything by default. If you are not giving anything, so explicitly it will be it will even without mentioning deny, by default it will, everything will be denied. So say like you are mentioning something allow and deny both, what will take precedence, allow or deny?
Yeah, deny will take the precedence.
Correct, correct. So deny will take the precedence. So that is the important feature of security here, right? So
But
deny is
I've seen some tools when
yeah,
we give access, it takes the highest. So the user will have multiple permission,
yeah,
authorization maybe.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, so so it will take the highest, which has the highest permission. It'll work like kind of.
Yeah, in different places, no, somewhere you will see the sequence will be very important, right? Some places you will see that no, what kind of access you are giving, what is the default policy, right? So say like some firewall rules you are writing. So by default, usually, right, for any firewall, right? So what we do is by default policy we define as deny, right? And then we give allow, right?
Yeah.
So but here what happens in IAM, right? Deny takes the precedence. Okay, so deny takes the precedence when it comes to authorizing any kind of access to any of the resources here. So by default everything is denied, right? And then if you are allowing or denying, right, so deny will take the precedence, whether it is written no in some other policy later or something. So here there is no one policy, you are attaching multiple policies, right? So you are attaching one policy where you are allowing something, or you are attaching another policy where you are denying something. So it will go through each and every policy, right, when it comes to authorization process, and then deny will take precedence. Got it?
Okay, he may be having the fullest access or permission,
Yeah.
but if the deny button or
Deny is
check.
there, then deny will take precedence. Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. So that we have to always keep in mind, right? Now, with certain process, some certain other application, some other place, so things may be different, right? So what happened? One of my friend, what he did, some many years ago, like we had certain firewall related stuff. So so another person from development team, right, so they asked for some server, right, and they took through a particular process, and that server no we gave it dedicated to the developer, right? So he was like good in doing some system administration activity and all those things, so he demanded and we just gave an instance to him. Now what he did, we asked like whether you require certain help, right? Some kind of you want us to assign some system admin who can help you out with the firewall rules. He said, no, fine, I can manage it myself, right? And then it was some kind of Citrix application or some kind of VoIP, some voice over IP, some application was there. So where, no, immediately as soon as you just put those things, these hacking attempt starts, like the kind of security incidents starts happening on the server, right? So he put some public IP, and then he wrote the firewall rule where the first the policy by default he mentioned as allow all, right? And then he started blacklisting, deny, right? 192.223 dot something, then deny this, deny that, deny that, deny that. He mentioned so much of deny, right? Everything he denied, whatever he knew, this 10.0.0.0 slash some 16, some 20. So everything he tried to deny, right? But initially his policy was allowable, right? Now what happened? That server was hacked. Some people came and they put some software on that, right? and that software was some other bank's software, some other online banking, some organization was there. They put the software there and they started diverting the traffic which was supposed to go to that bank, that started coming to this server, right? And then all those process happened where that bank official, they approached us, right? So what is going on? You are just trying to divert my users traffic to your server, and you are running my bank website on your server. Like that the thing came, right? So it's like some 15-20 years ago this incident happened, right? So we didn't have much of the rules and regulations, and a lot of things were exposed. So no firewall or something was there, some additional, some software firewall, he was using some IP tables, right? So like that it was happening. And then finally we came to know that, okay, that policy itself by default, he allowed everything, right? So once you allow everything and then you are denying, so that is going off, that is making no use, right? That is of no use. So like that it was happening. So in different situations, you can have different type of rules, right?
Okay.
That's it, right? So here what we can do is here for our understanding, right? So just sorry, this has gone. So this is related to how much of the access the user has, related to that. So here deny will take precedence, right? Now, so what happens in, with case of policy, right? It will determine the permission. Determine the permission. Policy will determine the permission, right? How much permission a particular. So determining of permission itself is called authorization. Understood?
Yeah.
So when you talk about authorization, we talk about policy. Okay. So how it is written? You remember how we had written? JSON. JSON we had written. We had created some generator or something. We had used policy generator.
Yes. Yes.
Sridevi, you are familiar with JSON?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. So this is JavaScript object notation, right? So certain standard file format for data interchange, right? So how we have HTML, right? How we have XML, right? How we have YAML, right? We use in Ansible, right? So how these things are there, like that only you have no JSON also. So this policy is here, this IAM policy is written in JSON. Okay. Now there can be different types of policies, right? So let me just go to the next page where I can just know. I'll just explain you the types policies. Policy can be of mainly two types, right? What we can say is managed policy, right? What will be there in managed policy? Managed means
Fully by AWS.
correct. So here you can have like AWS managed, right? So you can have AWS managed policy. However, here in this managed policy, you're also having option for customer managed also, right? So there can be fully managed by AWS, completely managed by AWS. However, we can create our own policy, and that we can call as customer managed policy, right? So another thing, something called is inline policy, right? Another term actually. So inline policy, right? So what is that inline policy? As the name refers, inline, right? How we write inline something? So some questions are there inline, we can just answer it, right? So inline means used in line with a particular entity, right? So this will be specific to a user or a group. I'll show you this one. Okay, so this is like specific to user or group, right? So this is something which is which we can write within some user. User is having some permission. Now we want to change the permission, the behavior, or we want to take away some permission by denying or something like that, right? So say like we allowed something and then we want to deny some portion of it, right? So we can deny it. So like that we can write some inline policy under some user or under some group, right? So that will be inline policy, right? So how we create policy? Using the policy generator we can create, right?
Yeah.
So we can use policy generator, or we can write by hand also if you are familiar, correct? Or we can use that policy generator and then we can modify that one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we will see that. Let me so how it works is you can recall that example policy, how we were using that braces and then we were writing things in double quote, right? Colon, we are using like this. All those things you remember? You're closing this, right? So all those things where we will have version, we'll have the action, right? We'll have that version and we'll have that effect. We'll have some statement, right? Then we'll have certain effect. What kind of effect we can have? We can have allow, deny, remember?
Yeah.
Right? So like that we can have, and then we can have some action, right? So all those things are written in this double quote like that we will be writing, right? Some colon will be putting, right? So we can do some kind of, say like you want to allow something on the, say like get object is there, right? You remember get object was there, some kind of put object can be there. So like that we have certain actions. What kind of action you want to perform? You want to know, say like for S3 bucket, if you are putting this get object or something, means what? You can download, right? You can put that in the bucket, means you can upload to the bucket, right? So like that you'll have certain actions, right? You can use some actions. You'll have certain resource name, right? You can mention certain resources, on what resource you want the actions. You want it on bucket, you want it on some instance, you want it somewhere else, right? Now you can put certain conditions, right? You can put some allow from that particular IP address or like that. So you can have certain rules and regulations here. So in that is JSON, right? So in that JSON format, we'll be writing like this. Okay, so we'll see certain things right here. So what happens is how this policy works is, right? So some request will come, right, from the, say like using the management console or CLI or certain SDK, right? Say like from management console, right? Some request has come as API request, right? So that will come, and then all of it will be merged, right? All these statements, right? All these statements are there, right? So all these statements are merged, right? From all policies. All the policies are there, right? So all the policies, all the statements, everything will be merged, right? Whatever is attached to a particular entity, right? Everything will be merged together. Then, what is the first thing checked? Does policy explicitly deny?
Yeah.
Right? I'll check like this. Let's make a flow chart. Okay. So it says yes. What will happen? Deny request. Okay. So explicitly, if it is denying, denied. Now say no. Explicitly not denied. Then nothing will happen. Now again another question. What does policy? What? This is what we discussed. Does policy explicitly allow?
Yeah.
No. Then what? Should be allowed or denied? Think and tell. Who can tell?
It will deny request again.
Perfect. Right, Sridevi? Prashant?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Right? So what happens is if it is explicitly
Yes, sir.
denied, right, then obviously the request will be denied. Correct? If it is explicitly not denied, right, still there is no guarantee that access will be granted. Does policy explicitly allow? If it is not explicitly allowed, if it is not explicitly denied, means by default it has to be denied only. Right? This is what we discussed. Now, if it is explicitly allowed, in that case, what? Allow the request.
Yeah.
Right? So this is how it works. Okay. So it will be allowed. Okay. So what is happening here is we are, if it is explicitly denied, denied. It is not explicitly denied and not explicitly allowed means denied. Right? So request is denied here. If it is explicitly not denied, if it is explicitly not denied, please focus here. If it is explicitly not denied, because this is related to security, this is very important. So it's not much important from examination point of view, but from overall, right, from our occupation point of view, right, when we are designing certain architecture, this is something which is very important, and it's not like something we have done once our system has been migrated and everything going on, then this comes in picture. It starts with the planning phase itself, right? So it's very important. So how we are planning things, right? So does policy explicitly denied? No, it's not denied, right? Then is it explicitly allowed? No, not allowed. Okay, denied. So now, in this case, it will be completely denied only. Now, if it is not denied and then allowed, then only it will be allowed. This is how flow works, right? So this is important. So deny will be taking the priority. Okay. So just remember this one. This is very important, right? So this is how this policy evaluation so works. So what we can say it is policy IAM policy evaluation. You can take a screenshot if you wish, right? Or just you can go through the video to revise this concept. Okay, perfect. All clear with policy. Any doubt?
No.
No.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So from exam point of view, Sridevi, they will not go in this much of depth because this is something not related to, not much related to our exam, right? However, for security examination, this is something very critical, right? And from the functional overall operational point of view also, this is very important, right? So this is from our this architect exam point of view.
One question,
Yeah,
Harish.
yeah,
So
sure.
usually now whatever you're using is root user, but what AWS recommends is to remove the root user and go ahead with the IAM users.
We should not remove the root user, but we should use the IAM user.
Yeah, that's what. You shouldn't go with the root user, but
Correct.
yeah, rephrasing
This
it.
is
So
this
you
is
should go with
very
IAM.
critical. Yes, this is very
Now,
critical thing, Sridevi.
suppose if I'm still using as a root user, whether I'll be able to access everything or only IAM policy, still that IAM policy holds good.
I didn't get the last question.
Suppose I'm still using root user, whether I'll be having access to all or it is always deny for every time.
Root user is like the complete boss of the account, right?
Yes, yes.
Nothing can be denied to root. Nothing.
Okay.
So root means something like infinite.
Right.
Okay, so that's where it is very dangerous. Very dangerous. This root user, one password you are using for this root user, this is so dangerous that this is just for our practical purposes. We are using in nowhere in the practical this production environment. People will be using this root user. This is not at all used. Simply you just create an account. You put some complicated password and just write that username and password and put it in the locker.
Right,
And,
right.
never use that root user only.
Right.
So what happens is we create IAM user, we give some full administration access, right? Maybe limited to certain particular resources, limited to certain region, right? And then this is the biggest loophole it can become, this root user, right? From the security point of view. So what we do practically in production environment is we create some IAM user, we give certain administration access, and then we use that user only. Right? This is for certain situation where that user becomes inaccessible. Something happens where you need it, really need it, right? So in those scenarios only we should use the root account, right? That is again we should also have certain policies in certain strategies actually to know, because this can become a single point of failure for the entire account, for including all the regions and all the availability zones, all the resources. This can become a single point of failure. Even if you are trying to secure it, not use it or something, it might get compromised, right? And if it is compromised, everything is compromised, everything is gone actually. Yeah, so that is another strategy for an architect to design things in such a way where it's not fully dependent on one particular account. So when we in production account environment, when we are designing certain architecture, there what we do is we just use multiple accounts, right? So we'll be having multiple accounts where we will have different type of resources and different type of strategies. We'll be doing certain VPC peering, right? And a lot of things, so that even if one account is compromised, everything is not compromised. So we just try to mitigate a situation where it is no longer single point of failure.
Okay.
Right. So we'll be going to that level. We'll be discussing about various options where how we can design our architecture in such a way that it is like the one account failure is not taking away everything from us.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Prashant, you wanted to ask something?
No, I'm fine, Harish.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So let's go back to our slide where we were discussing about certain keywords, right? So hope we have not crossed the break time. Correct. We have still some time, right? I think we have some time. Yeah. So we were discussing about policy, and then we have the next topic here is role, right? So role provides temporary access to AWS resources, but only after the role is linked to an IAM user account. Got it? You have heard about role earlier? You have seen certain roles?
Yes.
So what is a role?
What is the purpose of okay. I mean, so I can give you an example. So a person provides give us a tester access, so you'll be having only the testing kind of action can be done in the application.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Or project manager access, so he will have some business view, dashboards, reports he can do, but the tester cannot do. So those kind of things.
Yeah, correct. So here you there will be different type of roles. It's not like user. What happens in case of user, right? So we assign certain permission to one particular person, right? So one user we create for one person, right? So this role is something which is very dynamic, right? So what happens, say like you have some credential, right? And you use that credential, some username and password to access certain database, right? So now you have one username and password, you are using that to access a database, right? And you are writing that username and password in your application, right? And then your credential is getting exposed. Anybody who has access to the code can read that username and password, right? So that's it. So, and again, another issue is with that, even if it is not exposed, what happens when you rotate your credentials, you change your password, right? Or whatever keys or something. So what will happen? You have to rebuild the application code one more time, right? Just after changing your credential, you have to rebuild your code, right? So this IAM role is, right, a kind of identity, right? IAM role is identity which provides temporary access to AWS resources, but only after the role is linked to user account. So what happens is the role is whosoever requires a kind of role can assume that role. So role is fixed, right? As you said, say like some particular capacity, right? Some particular permissions, right? All those things are there. How much it can do, right? So you don't require a password. You don't require any access key or secret key, right? So temporarily, right? You can access that account. So whatever resource is required to be accessed, right? So this role can be assumed by any of the account, right? And that user account can use the particular resource. So this is how it works, right? So for any temporary credentials, right? We can, if we want to delegate permission to EC2 instance, or we want to delegate permission to say like any particular AWS service. Recently, we have done a delegated permission for certain, maybe for snapshot management or something, for some kind of lifecycle management we are doing. That time we have delegated some permission, right? There will be certain roles, or maybe to one user, as I said, like no, you want to give like additional permission or something temporarily, whatever permission that user is having, and I have created one general role, right? The same role can be assumed by that user to have enhanced privilege, right? To have additional authority, right? Authorization, right? To do something. So that kind of thing is there. So we will create some role and we'll see that one as well, right? So the final thing is here, the keyword list is action, right? What is an action? So action is specific operation, the principle, right? A person or application, a principle wants to perform on a particular resource. Right? So that is action. Clear, right? So what kind of action you want to perform? You want to upload something, you want to download something, you want to write something, you want to read something. So those kind of stuffs. Clear on these terms?
So we can set a policy even for the action also, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
correct.
if I don't want to provide an access to a person
Yeah.
to download a file from the AWS
Yes.
system,
Yes.
so that can be restricted. Okay.
Yes, perfect. You want them to say like we were seeing no effect and action in the policy section.
Yeah.
Effect was like allow or deny, and then action was like get object, put object, you remember?
Yeah.
So if you say effect as deny and then the action is put object, then that person will not be allowed to upload the object in the S3 bucket. If you say like action is like effect is like allow, and then the action is say like get object, then that person can download things from the bucket, right? So you can similarly like you can write the policy.
Okay.
Okay.
So in the role itself, it can be defined, is it?
This can be defined in the policy actually, right? And then that policy can be attached to role, and the policy can be attached to the entity, any of the entity, right? So this we'll see practically. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect. So okay, so we understood, right? Authentication and authorization, right? So what is authentication and what is authorization, right? So who the user is and what access the user has, right? So who the user is, authentication, and what permission the user is having, that is authorization, which can be achieved by writing policies. Okay, so next topic it is KMS. So before that, what I will do, we can go to dashboard. Just go to IAM dashboard. All of you, and just type IAM, right? So you can look for IAM, or say like you forget this IAM. So what you can say? What do you remember? User?
Access.
Yeah, or access. So with user, if you search, this will come somewhere. Say like you just say access. Access, I have typed it wrongly. Just see with access, it is coming. You see, with access also it's coming somewhere. Manage access. So like that, you can just choose, just click on that IAM, and you reach out to this page.
I see we can also reach from the my security credential from the name.
Yes. So here you are on the dashboard. Where you went?
On your name, so the login ID where you see in the right side top.
Here?
Yeah. My security credentials.
My security credentials. Okay. Yes. So from there you came to check your credential, no? That's why you landed up to IAM.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Because your security credentials are on the IAM dashboard itself. So it has taken you to that page. You came from there, so it has taken to this one. Correct. That's right. So you just all of you please come to IAM dashboard. We have a dashboard, right? And here in this cloud, in this user, you can also look at all these things whenever you get a chance, right? Please go through all these options whenever you get a chance. Prashant, you can see this. Prashant, speaking in mute.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. So here you please explore all these options. Okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So just explore all these options. Just click on that, and one by one you can see all those things. Here you see you have groups, no groups. You have user, no user. You have roles. Oh, so many roles. See, some backup has happened today. Some access analyzer has run today, right? So some other 21 days ago, some RDS, some service role is there. So like that, you have certain options with this particular account. Some, if you go to policies, you see a number of policies there, right? See all these options.
So how this role has been defined automatically?
It's not automatically. Actually, what happens is whenever I might be explaining things, few things will be there by default. Few things say like trusted advisor and for support and all, these will be there by default because this is related to our service, whatever. Say like I used RDS one time, but you it may not be there. You just check. Is it there? For all of you, please check.
No, RDS is not there.
RDS is not there, right? For you, for what all things are there for you?
Spot fleet tagging role, manager default role, lifecycle manager default, Meson, elastic file.
You used this elastic file one time, you remember?
Right.
Then only it came, right?
So
just click.
whenever we access anything, it'll get updated here.
Yeah, so you are creating a role actually. Say like you are trying to. So this is what the meaning of role is, right? So what is a role? Role is something, right, which will be accessing a resource on your behalf. Correct? So this is something. Role is also an identity, right? How you have that user and password, user and group, like that you have role which can be assumed by a certain application or by a user. So on your behalf, somebody is doing something, right? So on your behalf, right? So this access analyzer, I have given this a role to access analyzer where they will keep on checking the access, right? You see here, so all these things, how it is getting accessed, it is getting analyzed, right? You see this. If you just look at this JSON, you can see what is the effect, right? All these things you can see in detail. Easy to describe or describe this and that. For Lambda function, you do this. For organizations, you do this. So all on all the resources. So what kind of things are there? So that will be defined. So this is what the purpose of role. I'll just do something with role. Certain experiment we will do so that you have complete understanding of these groups, users, policies, and roles. Fine. Okay. So what we do is just click on that groups. There.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please confirm, everyone. Still, we are there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now under this group, you have create new group. Just click on that group. Everyone there?
Yeah.
Just type, say like, you can try to create a group, right? So we'll say like Dev group 1, Dev GRP1. Just name something like that, Dev group 1, and you click on next step. Now you see the policy here. Right? You see the policy? So here in policy, you have AWS managed, job function, customer managed. Click on customer managed. Do you have anything here? Nothing, right?
No.
So that means we have not created any policy, right? So you're seeing that we have customer managed policy and we have AWS managed policy, right? So we have no policy managed by customer, right? Click on AWS
Customer,
managed policy.
I have one in the customer, Harish.
Oh, you
Source
created the customer managed policy anytime?
Yeah, it was on 15th August, it says. The
Okay.
bucket,
Okay, good.
destination bucket.
I think you created that policy, no? That day you created
Yeah,
one
right.
policy, so you have not
Yeah,
deleted it.
right.
So for me, I deleted, so it's not there. Yeah. Usually I
So,
try to clean up things, so it will be not there. So you have a policy, right? Customer manage that. What is the
yeah.
name of the policy?
So we created one policy for source bucket,
Yeah. For doing what?
CRR,
Cross region
cross regional. Yeah,
application, right? So
yeah,
now you understand, right? So we are granting certain no things to some other application. So that who is doing that application? Are you doing that application or somebody else is doing that application, right? So
yeah.
right. So for that purpose we had created it. Right?
So
Now, yeah.
is it should we delete or
Yeah, you can delete it because no longer we need it, right?
okay?
Yeah, so later you delete it. Just once you come out of this, now you can leave it. Once we come out of this, you can delete that policy. You can go to policy, you can delete, right? Now you just click on that AWS managed policy. You see some policies here.
Yes.
How many?
There are many.
Yeah. So there are too many policies. You see so many policies. You keep on scrolling and it will showing 571 results.
Yeah.
So many policies are there in place, right? So what we will do is, for now, we will skip this. Okay, what we'll do? We'll skip this only. Okay. So we simply say next step. Just skip it. Don't put any policy. Okay. So you just have a group without any policy, right? Step 2 was to attach a policy that we have not done, right? Now we have just click on create group and you have a group without any policy, right? Just select that group, right? And just see edit group name, remove users. You have these options, right? You can delete group, you can edit group name, you can add users to the group, right? And you can remove the user from the group. So this is all the feature. If you just click on that without selection, right? So you are inside that resource, right? Now you just, everyone please come back and to this screen within that group.
Yeah.
So you see here, this group does not contain any user. Just now we have created group, we have not added any user. Now this group is having certain ARN, right? Amazon resource name, because this is a resource, right? This resource keyword we have seen, right? So this is a resource. With each resource at Amazon, you will have one ARN associated, that Amazon resource name, which is globally unique identifier for that particular resource, right? It will be including the account ID, it will be including the group name and all those concepts, right? So this is what is called group ARN. Now you go to permission and you see something. Do we have anything here?
Yeah. Policy.
Nothing is there, right? Except that policy. You see inline policy we were discussing. Just click here and you will see there are no inline policies also here. So there is no policy, there is no permission, there is nothing related to this particular group so far, right? And you see access advisor here. So what is this access advisor? Access advisor shows the service permission granted to this group, and when those services were last accessed, you can use the information to revise your policies also. Recent activity usually appears within 4 hours, right? So there is something called access advisor. We will be discussing about the advisor, right? So that's not an issue. So now it will come. So who is accessing, right? So all those detail will come. Based on that, you can see that you can restrict the permission, you can change the policy, right? The data will be stored for maximum of 400 days depending on when your region began supporting this feature, right? So our most important area is this permissions. So we'll come back later to this place, right? So for now, what you do, you go to users. All of you, please go to users.